Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Envera at the Board. Today, we're going to answer a question that is on the mind of almost everyone who submits a permit application to the AQMD. And that is, how long does it take to get a permit from the Air Quality Management District? So let's get started. Like I said, this is arguably one of the most common questions we get when it comes to permitting. And the answer, like the answer to so many other questions out there, is that it depends. Now, I was once told that if you're in a corporate meeting and you actually fall asleep, but you're called upon to answer a question or to provide feedback, once you're called upon, if the first things out of your mouth is, "It depends," then actually you are right about 80% of the time, because a lot of things in life depend on a number of other things, and things aren't clear cut. I digress. But things that affect the permitting process or the timeline it takes to get a permit involve public notice. Sometimes when a permit application goes through the public notice or the public notification process, it will take time to resolve all the comments received from that notification. The district may have to address those comments. You as the applicant may need to address those comments. Nonetheless, those comments, the number and the type in terms of really the concern being voiced, can affect the permitting processing timeline. The CEQA process, if your project is subject to CEQA, the process to prepare a CEQA document and then put that document out for distribution and comment also can affect it. That's a pretty lengthy process. CEQA documents tend to be pretty long. The EPA's 45-day review can also affect the permit processing timeline. And in this case, if you're a Title V facility and you file a permit modification or a permit application for a Title V facility, then the EPA has 45 days to provide comments on that permit application. And so that 45-day comment period needs to be factored in. And then last but not least is the completeness of your permit application. And so if your permit application is incomplete or it's missing a lot of information, then the district engineer is going to have to go back and forth with you to get the information that he or she needs to process that permit application. I know that in previous videos we've thrown a number out that says 20%, and that 20% is a number that we actually got when we attended a AQMD Stationary Source Committee meeting, and the number was referenced is that a district engineer on average takes about 20% of the time or their week chasing down information, trying to get more information from an applicant simply because their permit application didn't contain that piece of information in the first place. And so completeness of your permit application is very important when determining the overall timeline or the length of time it takes to get a permit from the AQMD. Now, when we say it depends, I know a lot of people see that as being, well, it could be anything. You know, we could throw it up in the air and see where things lie. But regardless, even though it depends, there are two things that are certain. Number one, the AQMD's rules have specific time limits in them regarding the length of time that it takes for the district to issue a permit. And so that's reassuring because we know that the district has and is aware of a timeline built into their rules, and they need to work hard to stick to that timeline so that they don't ultimately operate contrary to their own rules. And so it's good to know that there are rule limits on processing times. And then the second thing is that there is something that you can do to speed up the process. And I'll leave it as that, and I'll leave it as that because I want you to think. You can either pause this video or sort of think about it while you're watching this video and probably eating your lunch about what that one thing is. And so I'll leave it as that right now, so I'll put an ellipses here so we know to come back to that. To really understand how things work at the AQMD when it comes to permitting, especially the permitting timelines, it's important to understand the roles of you, the applicant, and then of the AQMD when it comes to the permitting process. And that's important because actually what we see is that fulfillment of these responsibilities is key to ensuring that the permit gets issued quickly. And we'll tie this all together at the end, but let's look at the first responsibility as you, the applicant. So as the applicant, your responsibility is to provide all of the information about this piece of equipment in the format prescribed by the AQMD. That's the only thing you have to do. You need to provide the district engineer or the district with enough information about this piece of equipment in the format that's prescribed by them. And that's all you have to do. It's pretty simple, but yet there's a lot in there to unpack. And then the responsibility of the district is simply to take that information and determine whether or not this piece of equipment can be constructed and operated in a manner that ensures compliance with all the rules and regulations of the air district. And that's all they have to do. And that is the permitting, the processing of a permit application is really built, it can be really summed down to this one statement here. The district is reviewing all the information so that they can make a decision as to whether or not this piece of equipment can operate in compliance with all the rules and regulations of the air district. Now, if you look at these two responsibilities together, the responsibility falls on you to provide all the information needed so that the district can do their job. Without that information, the district cannot do their job. And so because if they can't do their job, then to get your permit out of the district and issued by the district, they're going to need that information. And so there's going to be a back and forth between the district and the applicant to get all the information that you need. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're going back and forth, and it's like table tennis, right? And if the ball just keeps going back and forth, then that's probably a sign that the application wasn't complete to begin with. It didn't have all the information in the format needed so the district can do their job. And so that's another thing to think about. So let's move on to the time limits that are within the rules that govern how long the district has to issue a permit. So let's start with Rule 210. Most permits will fall under the processing timelines of Rule 210. And that is that when you submit a permit application to the air district, the engineer will have 30 days to make an initial pass or to make an initial determination of whether or not this permit application is complete. And when I mean complete, I'm saying it has all the information in it needed so that they can do their analysis. And so they take 30 days, and they have 30 days to tell you if it's missing information or it needs more information. Now, in the case that more information is needed, the district will actually call it and send you an email notifying you that more information is needed, additional information is needed. Sort of in the AQMD vernacular, this is called an AI request. And so 30 days, so initially the engineer will take 30 days to determine if the application is complete or it's missing information. If it's missing information, they will prepare an AI request. They will send you that AI request. And then you have to respond to that request. And depending on how incomplete your application was in the beginning, will sort of determine how much information is needed to fulfill this AI request. But once you get all the information submitted from the AI request, then the engineer will they have yet another 30 days to review that information to determine if all the information is present such that they can go ahead and process the application. And then, this process just keeps going back and forth. If it's missing information, they'll notify you, you provide it to the district, they have 30 days of review, and then if it's missing information, it will go back, and it's a circular process. And so it's easy to see how this process here can turn into a loop, almost an infinite loop, if your application is missing a lot of information, because it will just, it will go up here, the district will notify you, you'll respond, they have 30 days to look at it, they'll notify you again, if it's still missing information, they'll respond, you have to respond to them, and it will just go back and forth. Now, once you're able to break out of this loop, now if the district engineer has determined that all the information is there, then under Rule 210, they actually have 120 days to either accept or deny the permit application based on all the information submitted. And so that's under Rule 210. And so we see 120 days here, but that 120 days is after the engineer has determined that all the information is there. To get to that point, it can be a circular process depending on how complex the process is and the types of data that's needed. So that's Rule 210. Under 1710, and 1710 falls under the PSD permit, or the Prevention of Significant Deterioration permits. And under 1710, the AQMD has 180 days to make a determination if they will issue the permit based on receiving a complete permit application. And so that's under Rule 1710 and PSD, Prevention of Significant Deterioration. Number 5 is Rule 3003, Title 5. Now, Title 5, I would argue that that's another common class of permits filed to the AQMD. Title 5 facilities tend to be larger facilities. They're sometimes called major sources. But under Title 5 and 3003, the district has anywhere between 60 days and 18 months to issue a permit. Simple permits like an admin change tend to get issued on the lower, before the 60-day window. And that's, again, after receiving a complete permit application. And then for more complex permits, like a Title V renewal or a significant modification to a Title V permit, then it's closer to 18 months. And again, the ranges are there. There's 60 days and 18 months, but it really depends on how much information is needed by the engineer to do their job. That's really the determining factor. If all the information is there, it's quick. If it's not there, it's long. And so those are some of the processing timelines under 3003. Now, before I get to the last part, I want to circle back to the beginning here. And we said that, the amount of time it takes to process a permit application depends on a number of things here, but we said that two things are certain. Rule limits are in place to require the district to process a permit application within certain timelines. We saw that in 210, 1710, 3003. And then we also noted that there is something that you can do. And the thing that you can do really comes down to looking at the responsibilities between the applicant and the district. And so we talked about, the role as an applicant is to provide all the information needed. We talked about this loop here, that if the information isn't there, that this loop will just keep going back and forth until all the information is there, and then it breaks out. And so what do you think is the one thing that you can do to ensure that you get your permit quickly? That one thing is simply to prepare a complete permit application. And we've said it so many times before because it's so important. And so if you prepare a complete permit application, then you fulfilled your responsibility as an applicant. And now the engineer can simply do their job. They have all the information, they can do their job, and they can make their determination. And when you're looking at this loop here for 210, you don't fall into this infinite loop. You quickly move through it, because the quicker you move through this process, the quicker you can get your permit. And so the single best thing you can do is just prepare a complete application. One that has all the forms, it has all of the fees, and then most important, it has a detailed engineering evaluation included. And that detailed engineering evaluation is the meat and potatoes of the entire application. Because when the district looks for information, they're going to look at this one document. And if it's not in that one document, they're going to come back to you and ask you for more information. Now, you know what, one way or one follow-up question to an engineering evaluation is, what is required to go into an engineering evaluation? We talked a bit about this on a previous At the Board video, but there are 10 elements that go into an engineering evaluation. We won't talk about them here. We'll refer you to that video, but there are 10 elements. Now, one thing that we find to be very beneficial is when you start down the road of permitting is to talk to your permit engineer ahead of time to know exactly what is needed. What types of data do they want to see in your engineering evaluation so that they can do their job? What data is needed? And sometimes I like to think, in an ideal world, and I've always wanted to try this, is go to talk to your engineer and ask them, what do you want to see in my permit application? Give me everything that you want to see. And then, what I would like to do is just prepare that permit application based on their recommendations, and then give it to them and say, okay, I fulfilled my responsibility. I've given you everything that you need. Can you give me a date of when I can come and pick up my permit application? Just tell me what date I can come back to you and get my permit application, because I've fulfilled my responsibility as an applicant. In theory, once you have all this information, you'll process it. You have fulfilled your responsibility as the district. And if we agree, then there should be no fuss about the permit, and you should be able to get that permit quickly. So again, talk to your engineer, ask them, what do you want to see? And then if you're feeling brave, you may want to say, well, okay, so if I give you everything, can you give me a date of when I can come back to pick up my permit application, to minimize all the back and forth and maybe not stay in this infinite loop forever. So there you have it. The question, like I said, that's on almost everyone's mind when it comes to permits. How long does it take to get a permit? The answer depends, but there is something that you can do. And I'll leave it as that. So we hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll hope to see you in the next one. Take care.